As you can see here, there are a few links. I was hoping to be able to play some of these, but I haven't figured out how to do that yet here on StreamYard. Anyway, the first link there is on my website over here, and it's the very first one, Tremoring in the Wild. It's a video of an impala. I do believe that's uh, and it's in a leopard's mouth. And I could talk you through it, but what I want you to see and what I want you to do is watch this. The second one is a video from a long time ago. It's on YouTube, and it was National Geographic tracked a polar bear down and shot it to get it with a dart to get it to so they could put a collar on it. That's what they were doing. So, and the original National Geographic video shows the bear coming out of that. And there are similarities between the bear and the video of the impala. The impala lives. You wouldn't know it to look at the very first picture. And then this third link is my information sources. So I don't have to explain to you all of the science because that page has all of the books. I did pop a few studies in there, and some of the training I've taken, but study-wise, I go through those. That list could be incredibly long. And even the books that I've read, I think I might have parenthesed some of the studies and some of the books. There would be several hundred. And like, for example, I'm right now reading Ian McGilchrist's The Master and His Emissary. And it's about the hemispheres of the brain and their functions and responsibilities. And it seems like every third word, he's got a footnote to the study involved. Like I said, I don't have the time, nor do I think you'd be interested in trying to read all this stuff. So I compiled it as much as I can. If you want to pursue that, that's great. But this is where I get my information from. And some of this, you'll notice on the YouTube video that it says in there that animals do this kind of thing so they don't have memory. Now, animals remember differently than humans do, but that is the point. And Dr. Levine, in his book, Awakening the Tiger, and then in Healing Trauma, and in the third one, In an Unspoken Voice, mentions this several times about ethologists, and the video of the Tremoring in the Wild on my website, that is being filmed by the ethologists and park rangers in wherever that happened, probably Africa. And one of the things that Peter Levine says in his book is that ethologists look for these animals to go through this process because that's how they know they'll live. And if you watch the impala and leopard one, you will see that. That's exactly what it's fascinating because the impala does live, surprisingly so. It's very interesting, but that's what they look for. The process are quite similar. So anyway, that is those. So take a snapshot of this, screenshot, do it and look these up. I would love to have run them here, but such as it is, there we have it. Anyway, so is it possible to heal trauma? Some people don't think so. In fact, I had a conversation yesterday with somebody that used quotation marks around the word heal because actually the discussion was about triggers. And I said, well, if you heal the trauma, the triggers go away. Well, you can't heal the trauma. And I said, okay, show me the evidence. And that ended the conversation. As we discussed yesterday, what happens, and I used my definition of trauma and then showed a few things. Here's the neurological side. We talked about this. When this autonomic function happens, boom, we get knocked out of the autonomic nervous system state of social engagement into fight, flight, or freeze. And it could go, or it could go slowly. And then physiologically, we have this. We get out of the state of equilibrium into this physiological state of fight or flight. And that's what you can see with his head and his face. But then look at all these other things. And I went through this last night, the different changes that occur in the human physiology almost instantly. And what happens when we stay in these states. Now, to go back to here, and in my definition, I pointed out that this is autonomic. If the amygdala of the brain says threat, this all happens autonomically. There is no choice. Not willpower, it's not logic, it's an instant. Your autonomic nervous system just takes over and does this and changes everything. Yeah, I think I can hear some of these wheels turning. So if your boss says, we need to talk, what happens? Boom, into fight, flight we go. Here's another one. I use this one sometimes when doing presentations at conferences. Honey, we need to talk. What does the man do? Boom, into fight or flight. And he knows he shouldn't do either. So what really happens is he goes into freeze. And what does that turn into? How come every time I ask you to talk, you have nothing to say? There's a good reason. There is a good reason. Anyway, but this is an autonomic cycle. It starts there. Now, my opinion, it starts down here and goes up through here. And we can talk about some of the aspects of healing later on. So boom, now here we are. The cycle completes because of this process on the far right, the deactivation process. So think about this. If this happened because of a survival response, doesn't it make sense that evolution would have also created a way to get out of this? Because as you might remember from last night, this stuff will lead to physiological diseases. And what kind of life do you think this is? Emotionally, belief-wise, physiologically, worldview-wise. If there was not a way for that cycle to end, how long do you think society would have lasted? How long do you think human species would have lasted? Robert Sapolsky is very fond of saying that this experience is not meant to be chronic, it's meant to be acute. Okay, that being the case, that means or would imply that the human organism has an autonomic deactivation process that will close out the cycle and move us back into social engagement. We can call that neurological equilibrium and physiological equilibrium. The heart rate returns to normal. The breathing rate returns to normal. We can move into rest and digest. I know that some people think that can't happen, partly because they don't understand what trauma is, and I defined that last night. All right, so but we see something here, don't we? If this is autonomic and it kicks us out of equilibrium, which is the place of health and growth, is a state of disequilibrium. We are no longer in that place of health and growth physiologically because resting and digesting is not happening here. The reproduction is not happening here. Those things are put on the sideline for the sake of survival. Whether or not, even if it's the boss doing this, or you get pulled over by the cops, that still activates the system that does this physiological and neurological change. And if we don't complete that cycle autonomically, all of that energy, and we're now stuck in this right here, which includes that guy we were just looking at. This is the neurological side, the emotional side, and then the guy's the physiological. He can either be afraid or he can be angry, fight, flight, and that is the state of trauma. Doesn't it make sense that this system we've evolved with has a way of deactivation? I think so. And it was Dr. Levine. Dr. Levine thinks so because he made a very famous quote, which I don't hear many people saying, that trauma is curable. Sentence, full sentence, period. Now, this is a guy who's got 2 PhDs, one in psychology and one in biological mechanics. He knows this physiological stuff. He knows this neurological stuff. He also said in the next sentence, trauma is curable, and the fact that it is could lead to a very profound life. I just happened to take his word for it. Here's a guy who's got a half a century of working in the field of trauma healing. I think that's a bit of experience. I'm only a fifth of the way into that. He's beyond a master. I mean, essentially the master is what, 10,000 hours? The craftsman? A little bit past that, but he's got 50 years. My trainer, and see, Dr. Levine was the guy who got me to looking at Dr. Vercelli, who also teaches trauma healing. He just happens to have picked up where Levine could have gone. So what I wanted you to see with those 2 videos of the animals was what that process looks like. And that is why animals in the wild don't get traumatized. If that cycle happens, they get up like nothing happened. Because the cycle was complete. This autonomic deactivation process processes everything that was involved with that. The emotions and the physiology and the neurology. That's what it's like. Now, okay, I can hear the question. What about if we've been living in this state for several years? Okay, I had 58 years. It started in my childhood. In fact, for me, it might have started in utero. I'm here to tell you that your body has this deactivation process that can go all the way back there. It can handle all of that. Because of its very own nature, your body, as Bessel van der Kolk famously titled his book, The Body Keeps the Score. I don't have to do that up here. You'll notice something here. Nothing here is here. None of this. See that? That arrow is not pointing to his brain, it's pointing to his eyes. Because the eyes do change when an event is happening. Something that's a threat, a physical threat. Your eyes will change. They'll dilate. They'll whoop, hone in. A little bit of the periphery is gone. It's typically, here's your threat, at least as far as a human's concerned. That is what is beginning to happen. Now, yeah, the brain does change. I can assure you of that. And the longer you stay in this state, the more that changes. But it wasn't, you didn't talk yourself into trauma. You're certainly not going to talk yourself out of it. You don't need to. All of this is physiological and neurological, your autonomic nervous system. And so Dr. Berselli found a way to duplicate that mammalian, because reptiles go into freeze. Fight and flight is something that, I mean, when the leopard's chasing the impala, one is in flight, the other could be in fight, but the whole point is that they're both geared up. They're moving at high speeds. And then boom, goes into freeze because the impala gets caught. That's what the whole video is about. And then that process, well, Dr. Berselli created a way to deal with the built up or accumulated, piled up, pent up, accumulated, or as you know, I circled here, and what Dr. Porges, he says stuck. Eric Fromm says piled up, and I think he claimed he took that from Freud, and then Dr. Levine says accumulated, as does Dr. Berselli, cycle after cycle after cycle after cycle that don't go anywhere. That's like being an emergency responder thinking the call is still going on when it's not. But when we use the autonomic deactivation process, which is the reset of the breathing and tremoring, that completes all of these cycles. This process can go where words cannot. That's the beauty of it. It will go where words cannot go and words don't need to go. I can get into a bit more of that, but I'll leave that alone for now. So again, if you have questions, right there, just send me your questions. All right. I will answer them. I think we'll do a Q&A at the end of this week. That's what trauma's nature is, what makes it curable. Your body is equipped to do this work. You just need a guide to help you out. Now, what does that even look like? Well, I suppose I should have uploaded. Imagine a nice cross. You know, that's what we would like our healing to look like. I'm here to tell you, it doesn't. However, when you're healing, like I said, I just got finished saying you don't need to talk about your stuff. So skip the whole catharsis thing. All right. I mean, I have most of my clients and I have oftentimes, even while tremoring, just talked about stuff, mostly about what's going on in the body, never about events that threatened us. I don't ask for those. That might come in the middle of the week. But anyway, I wanted to share this with you because this is what healing most often looks like. So let's say this is the starting point over here. Two things are occurring when you start tremoring, because we've been, I mean, I don't know about you, but the only thing I was familiar with were my symptoms. That was my inner life. And oh, what the hell that was. I'm thinking if you live with trauma, you know that feeling. So we don't have to describe it even. We know that feeling. The hypervigilance, the exhaustion. Oh God, the list is so long, it's mind-blowing. And so I colored all these kind of differently for a good reason, because as we begin this healing process, right from day one, whether you feel it or not, if you're tremoring, your body is completing and discharging. So if you lay down, you go through the thing, you might not necessarily feel it, might start a little bit late. The idea is to develop a sense of safety. Once the body begins to feel safe, boom, it will start to complete and discharge. You might think it feels a little funny. You might just be amazed that, holy smokes, I didn't know there were muscles there. And wow, I can feel that little muscle. I felt sometimes the different muscles in your quadricep is quadricep because there's 4 muscles that make it up primarily. I have felt several of them all doing different things at the same time. Who knew? Any event. So your symptoms will begin, they might flatline for you, just flat out here. They'll start out, but we don't know because we're so familiar with them. That's all we know. We might have identified with them. This is my life. I guess I'm just meant to be crazy and stupid and ignorant and unlovable and unloving. Okay, well, okay, but that's not true. And so they sometimes will pop up and they'll do all kinds of weird, crazy crap while we're moving along. And some of them will just flat out dissolve on their own because there's another thing going on at the same time. When you start to tremor, all these life signs will begin to emerge. And that's part of the program. We'll discuss that later this week, the Raise Your Resilience Toolbox program. You can find that on the website up there on the corner, raiseyourresilience.com. Just don't email, just go look it up. All right. And so these life signs will begin to emerge, and some of them kind of do the same thing. They're kind of flat. They might show up, and you might go, oh, wow, cool. And then it takes it down on you. Whoa, okay, I thought I had that one down. Boom, all of a sudden it takes off this way. These go away. Yeah, you heard that right. That's what it means to heal. It's to be symptom-free. The life signs, there's no end. You know what else we can do? We can identify ourselves by this process here, and that gets us stuck. The idea up here being that since the symptoms are gone, I get to just be. To me, one of the ways of telling that you're healed is being able to put your feet up and do nothing. Absolutely nothing. And if you're not feeling at peace and contentment, there's a good chance you're still stuck in trauma. We might try all kinds of things. I talked a little bit about this last night. And all those things we try to relieve symptoms, so I got to cold splash my face. But first I got to get out of bed. I got to eat a particular thing. Then I have to meditate for half an hour to an hour. And then I have to do some movement stuff, and I do some yoga. And then at 10 o'clock, I have to splash my face. And then I get to do an hour or two of work. And then maybe I have to splash my face again, or I have to get up and walk, and so forth, so on. That's symptom management. I'm talking about the lack of symptoms entirely. That's what healing is. And so just being means I get to put my feet up and do nothing, and my symptoms don't pop up because they're not there anymore. So those triggers, that's what the discussion I had yesterday was about. The triggers that we all have or had, yeah, it feels great, by the way. Guess what? Triggers are only related to trauma. You heal your trauma, you will not have triggers. Will you still have a stress response system? You bet. But the beauty of that is that as you heal, see this line here? So let's imagine something. This stress response goes here, right? As you heal, this threshold right here goes up. It will take more for you to get out of social engagement. Dr. Porges mentions this in his book, The Handbook. He's got the Handbook of the Polyvagal Theory. Read the definitions of safety in the glossary, which he started the book with. A brilliant idea. Anyway, that means that this has gone up. it gets harder to get there, because what he says, he says it, and he almost makes it sound like it can't happen. But, and Dr. Berselli's website is trauma prevention for a good reason. This threshold goes up, so it becomes a whole lot harder for me to get stressed out, because my brain and body actually know what a threat is. And the boss going like this is not a threat. That might be hard to hear. That might be hard to visualize. That might be hard to imagine. I'm going to ask you to dream a little bit. Start dreaming. What would it be like to not have that fear? Yeah, it's a great feeling. So this is what it can kind of feel like and look like, but eventually there is a threshold here, the middle threshold, where the symptoms no longer become your focus, because life, you begin to move out of these states back into the state of social engagement. And once you're in that neighborhood, it's like moving neighborhoods. Yeah, this is the nice neighborhood, I guarantee you. And you will feel the difference here. You might already be dealing with some pathology related to this. I can't guarantee you that's going to heal. Even though I've got a friend who had cancer and she's hasn't had it since, she just changed her lifestyle to get out of this. However, you will start feeling things as this happens. That also feels really good, because this is sensational, quite literally. It feels good. It's pleasurable. So that's the picture of what it is to heal. Can you heal? You bet. Developmental trauma, CPTSD, PTSD, I had all of it. There's so much overlap with that. It's, that could be a whole nother video. But this has already been a long one. I want you to know that trauma is curable. Completely. 100%ly. Your biology will change. Your neurology will change. Your psychology will change. That means your emotions, your cognition, your spirituality could change. That's been a fun one. How I am in the world and how I am in the environmentally. Oh man, this is a good life. Let me tell you. And figure, I started this when I was 58. I'll let you figure out what that means. But it wasn't quick either. This is not a microwave fix. I'm going to say mine took 7 years, and it was worth every second and every penny I paid for it. There was a time when I was homeless because everything I made, I was paying into this healing process. After that, I met some angels that helped me out, and hey, the whole healing process was, all right, this is not a do-it-yourself project. Let me tell you that. Okay, you don't want this to be a do-it-yourself project. You want a guide. I'll get into that later, but yes, it's curable. You want to know that. This is your anchor. This is something you can count on, because once you start to see the changes, and here's a physics rule: a body in motion stays in motion. So I want to take this body for you and get it in motion. This body's in motion. Crash and burn. Gone. Will I forget all this stuff? No. I won't have the symptoms physiologically or neurologically or psychologically. But memory-wise, do I forget my events? No. However, the emotions are different about them. This is, yeah, way cool stuff. I know my story. Can't change it. I don't know that I want to. But the emotional impact, completely different. Completely. So, can you be cured of your trauma? Yes. 100%. Like I said, if you have questions, I'm going to have to go to here. All right, right there. Send me your questions, even if you're watching this tomorrow. Whoop. And then go check out the website, and that's where all the video, the polar bear video is not there. And I don't necessarily ascribe to everything on that's interjected into that polar bear video. I just want you to see the motions. But if it raises questions, go ahead and ask them right here. And then while you're there, you can look up the people I've trained with, the people I've read and continue to read and study. This has been 12 years now. Anyway, there you have it. I'm going to get going because this has been long. But thank you. Have yourself a pleasant evening. Tomorrow night, 6 o'clock. Bye.